plug and place. Pop off for the home team, always, always. I wanna build a conclave for the black babies in the hallway. Tell them dream big, go the long way. Cause the word is yours like when I say. Cause they don't tell you it could be like this. But this squad only come with the hits. Times get tough and keep your wits. Can't let no evil touch these lips. We don't take no defeat like this. Who you know with the heat like this? Who you know when they beat like this? Say we like this. Cause we blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map. We gotta keep it on track. We blackity black. Please step back, I like my hair like that, touch it and get smacked. We got the map, we gotta keep it on track. Running ahead and I'm yelling Geronimo. All of my power come right out my follicles. I got it online like my hair be. They scared of we, beware of we. Who you know go and turn nothing to something. We steady thriving, they thought we was crumbling. All around the world, our music bumping. That's humbling to see. We don't succumb to defeat. Keep it with crumbs at our feet. We making waves in the streets. We made a way in the streets. All of my people gon' eat. We on the way to the fees. We're bumping this heat and patting these twists on beat. Move too slick, no grease. Push through, make it look easy. Cause we blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map. We gotta keep it on track. We blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map. We gotta keep it on track.
Blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map. We got to keep it on track. We blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map, we gotta keep it on track, yeah. We black and we proud. Go tell your sons and your daughters to stand tall and always remind them of who they are. The sky's the limit and none of that can change when God is in it. Often imitate and never duplicate melanin. Take a look at the world, man, we always in. Woo! I'm black and I'm proud. I used to say my hair was so nappy. Now I embrace the beauty that flows out of me. From the top of my head to the sole of my feet. And you know you can't check me. You like my hair straight, I said take that to Becky. That's a wrap for this verse. Cause we blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map, yeah, we gotta keep it on track. We blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map, yeah, we gotta keep it on track. We blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map, yeah, we gotta keep it on track. We blackity black. Please step back. I like my hair like that. Touch it and get smacked. We got the map, yeah, we gotta keep it on track, yeah.
Who got that range? Who brought them chains? Went through the maze. Came out the end into some brighter days. Getting win after win. They thought it was a base, but now I ain't a phase. Leave them in the days. This ain't for play. This has been a way. This is for the days when you thought she wasn't gonna make it. But look, ma, we made it. We won it, we take it. We stay on this ground, and this ground don't get shaky. We shape of the babies. Don't never get flaky. Don't mind if you hate me. Can't nobody take me. Maybe I shouldn't be so blatant, but blatantly. Who care about what you say to me patiently? We've been moving up the ladder so faithfully. We've been pushing through disasters so frequently. Sweet like roses, we stand tall with this. Free like Moses, act like you know this. Sweet like roses, we stand tall with this. Free like Moses, act like you know this. Black, 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 black.
Black, 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 black,
Black, black, black, black, black, black.
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 Black, 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 black. Black, black,
Black,
black, black.
black, black,
Black, black,
black,
black,
black,
black.
black, black.
Yo, what is going on, world? Welcome back to another episode of The World Can Wait. We continue our conversation. I'm black and I'm proud. As you can see, maybe you can't, you might be just listening. I titled this one Harlem Nights because our guest is coming in straight out of Harlem. Welcome to the show, everybody. Mr. Keenan Gordon. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me, brother. Greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start this one off the way we started the other one off the other day, with a little icebreaker. I mean, we don't really need to break no ice because I know you, but it was really fun to hear everybody's responses. I don't know if you got to see it, but we did the Don't Take My Black Card, and then you got to fill it in. So my Don't Take My Black Card was, I don't listen to Prince or Michael Jackson, never did, never have, don't plan on doing it. And it was just like, what? Like, yeah, so...
Oh wow! I'm gonna tell you, don't take my black card, and I may be in trouble for this. I don't play spades. I hate spades. I'm a Uno's kind of guy. So the people don't know me. What do you mean you don't play spades? Like they offended. Well, I can teach you. I go, I don't want to learn. Oh, I'm like, I'll play you in some chess. And they're like, oh, well, okay, well, I don't really play chess. Sometimes on the computer. That's what they say, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's so funny because that was Dom's joint. He was like, "Yo, I don't play spades. Like I know how.
Yeah,
I don't
I
particularly
don't know
care to
how.
play
I don't
spades."
play at all.
Oh, you don't even know how,
No, I don't even know how.
and you have no interest in learning, and you're just
No
like,
interest in learning.
and you're just cool
No
with it.
interest. I'm one of these kids. I like to go out and play. If I go to the casino, I like to play a little bit of baccarat. I like to play roulette, slots every now and then. Just never care for spades or the cards games. I've seen a lot of people do well at the poker tables. Just never been my cup of tea.
Interesting. That's so like in my family, and I don't know if you know this or not. Like, I mean, we know how to play spades, but we don't really play spades. We play big whiz. So
Yes, that's
when
correct.
when people don't know how to play spades, it's like, black card, come here. But at the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
time, it's like I don't really care because I know how, but I would much rather not play. Like I treat the way black people as a whole tend to treat black people who don't know how to play spades is the way I treat people who don't know how to play bid whiz. It's like
exactly.
go
I
away.
mean, if you look at this on a whole, where I'm talking about just not major cities, but with the names, if you think New Orleans, you think Chicago, you think Harlem,
Mhm.
they say, okay, you don't get no black in that. Those are soulful culture cities. And they were like, well, it's a culture. You can't play spades. I'm like, no, really, I can't. That's just it. That's
I
just it.
can't. I won't. I don't. Leave me alone. You got them dominoes.
Yeah. Oh, we play some dominoes. We play some dominoes.
Okay, okay. So we got that. Now I wanna jump into it. As I said in the opening, you're from Harlem. And one of the things that we've kind of been addressing, not just in this conversation, in all of them, but particularly in this one, as black people, yes, we have the same color skin, different shades, same color skin. We have a lot of similar experiences, but there's also different experiences. And then that same concept would apply to black people in America, right? Like my experience growing up black in America in Virginia is different than yours growing up black in America in New York. And then specifically like I'm like 10, 15 years younger than you. So the time difference is going to affect things. And what I wanted to find out from you is um, growing up in Harlem, in New York, all the different experiences that you've had, how has that shaped the way you view what it means to be black? Like, what does it mean to be black to you? And like, is like your understanding of what it means to be black something that gives you pride, or is it something that kind of makes you like sad?
Right. The first thing you have to understand is it starts at home, Charlie. It starts at home. And what's so funny is being born and raised in Harlem, I lived there the first 41 years of my life. I now reside in Virginia. When I was brought up, I was told to hate Virginia. Virginia is one of the worst states in the world. My mom is from Norfolk, Virginia. My mom will be, let's just say, almost to the 8-0 come this March. Her birthday is 5 days before mine. And where her growing up, what she experienced, she portrayed on me. And it reflected upon her views on life. My mom left Norfolk, Virginia when she was about 8 or 9. My grandmother opened a successful restaurant in Harlem. And from what I knew of Virginia, she said that you had to realize when we were growing up, on the nights Muhammad Ali would fight and he would win, that was the night the Klan would go around and hanging people.
Mm.
Yeah. So she just had a great hate and distrust for the state of Virginia, as well as the people who were in power who were doing these things. And that's something that kind of affected me where why would people want to hang or kill another person? And later, when I get to college, one of my professors told me something very powerful that always resonated with me. Young man, if you don't ever know who you are, I'm going to tell you right now, you're the only man that could get on a ship for 3 to 4 weeks, be surrounded by feces, urine, and filth, chained down amongst your brethren, and can come out that ship, be taken somewhere, given a bath, branded, sold, just because the color of your skin, not even looking who you are, not even knowing the language. You can have everything robbed and taken away from you, and you still here. I never forgot that. He just pretty much projected a speech to me but he was talking about my ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Never forget that. And another thing I'll never forget is my grandmother's brother. I only met him once. When I was 7 years old, he said, listen, always be proud of who you are. And it's the first time I hear this phrase, don't you ever shuck and jive for nobody. He worked for Amtrak. And at that time, when he worked there, they wanted him to sing like Temptation songs or whoever was older, the popular black person was. And it's like you would make certain money, but they would give him like $5 tips, where as compared to now, that would be like getting like a 50 to like $100 tip. So from him singing, he, instead of just having money, he could have enough money to buy loaves and stuff. And he said he always hated that, but he understood it. Imagine you at work and if one of your coworkers call you over, you already know they want you to sing. And he told me, don't ever shit and job, be proud of who you were. He dies maybe like 8 years later, and I never see him again. But I always remember that, always.
That's one of the things that has come up a lot this week in this conversation, and I love it. Is what you were just talking about from I think you said it was from your professor talking about like
Yes,
who your ancestors are and what you come from, that strength that's in us as black people, all the things that we had to persevere just to be here. You know what I mean? And it's like that's in our DNA, and I
right,
love how that keeps coming up and how it seems to be more commonly known these days. Because one of
right,
the things that I was addressing on Tuesday when we were speaking is how it took a while for me to get here. Right? I've always like I'm black. Like I've always known that, but I didn't know what it meant to be black because I think a lot of it has to do with the whitewashed history that was taught. If I'm being
yes,
honest, like
yes.
and I explained it the other day. The way it was taught to me was the lazy people in Africa had nothing better to do, so the
And we
nice
did
white
you a
people,
favor and brought you
yeah,
here.
exactly. And so for me growing up, it was like slavery wasn't a big deal. It wasn't even a problem. It was a solution. Um, Racism is dead and over with. Like so, like can we just move
You guys
on?
are free now. You can do what you
Yeah,
want. And that's not true at all. So
yeah.
I want to get to the heart of the question you asked me about being born in Harlem. And Charlie, we know each other so long. I'm comfortable in my skin. Listen, I'm born in 1974 at Mount Sinai Hospital. I'm born in a time where Harlem is still thriving. It's a beautiful place. It's drugs there, but it's not like it is now. And if say if you were white growing up in Harlem and you were there, it wasn't a big deal. They had Columbia University. Columbia University is on the west side of Harlem from 110th Street all the way to 119th Street at that time. Now they're all the way up to 124th. They've had all those buildings rented out. They're dormitories. If you saw a white person walking around in Harlem in the 80s, this would be the conversation. They'll say, are you looking for help or do you need some action? If you're looking for help, that means you need some drugs. If you're looking for action, you're either looking for a gambling house or a whorehouse. So let's just get that out the way. I've had experiences where people say good and bad. I've seen a lot of things at an early age that make me say, well, wait a minute. If they're holier than thou, why would they act this way? I'm not picking on anything, but there was a Jewish property owner. He owned buildings in Harlem, about 3 or 4 of them. And on Friday, he would go get his drugs, get his black prostitute, go do what he do in one of his rented rooms, whatever, and then go home to his family. I've seen 2 kids from New Jersey come down to the corner of 140th and Lenox Avenue, and they say, "Oh, officer, we just got robbed in the middle of the block." This officer on cue, white officer, says, "Buddy, check this out, right? You want me to go up this block and get shot over $20 high? You got ripped off. You see your place say Jersey? I want you to take your behind 2 blocks down, go to 138th Street, get across that bridge, go to Jersey, and don't let me see you back here. Run along." And that was the end of the conversation. And right there, you start to understand what lawlessness is. But we're going to stay on topic. For the most part, I went to St. Charles Borromeo in Harlem. Good experience, good and bad. Pretty much it's probably 85% black, the rest Hispanic. You have a different variety of people. I don't want to say just Cubans, Puerto Rican, Dominicans, but everybody. At that time, school just started getting rough, just a lot of distractions, a lot of inside personal issues, but I had a good time being raised around people. So in my neighborhood, it's like 4 complexes all together. We got a main second floor area inside the building. Had a lot of friends growing up, mainly all black. At that time, after the 5th grade, my mom takes me downtown to Our Lady Good Counsel. They're closed now. And by me going to school downtown on 91st between York and First, changed my life. All the kids down there all live down there. I was the only one who lived in Harlem because you had other Catholic schools people go to because they want to be around their kids or other people similar other ethnicities. It got me to see other things. I mean, for you to go to a friend's house and he could say, "Hey, let's go by my parents' house." He live on York Avenue. He got a doorman. You're gonna come in. You're gonna be greeted in. He see I got the same uniforms on. Get a pass. Nobody think otherwise. They can see you his classmate. You can go over to First Avenue. You can go see their buildings. You can go over to Second or Third Avenue. You can see all these apartment buildings. And I didn't grow up in the projects by no stretch of the means. I grew up in a nice apartment building called Riverbend in Harlem. I loved where I lived. I had family members who grew up in Lenox Terrace, and people did well for themselves. I don't have a hardship story. It's just I'm from Harlem. That's it. And by me going to school downtown, I got to see things different for what they were. I really didn't experience racism too much, but I can say my first experience with racism, I'm probably about 13 years old. And I'm going downtown to see my mom. My mom works in Young and Rubicon, which is on, it's like the number two at that time, number two advertising agency in the world. I go down there to meet her. I get off the one bus and I'm crossing the street about 43rd Street between 5th headed over to Madison. African American lady's probably about 30 feet away from me. The street was uneven. She tripped and fell, and her purse just spilled all within the street. 13 years old. I'm kind of a fast kid. So I run to grab her purse to help pick it up. And she screams out, "No!" I freeze. It's two Asian gentlemen coming behind me, and they're looking at me like, and they're looking at her like, "Lady, he's helping you get your bag." So she just kind of feel bad. I just kind of put her purse down. Because, I picked it up to give it to her. But I just kind of put it down, and I just felt nervous. My heartbeat was racing. And the guy just tapped me on the shoulder, and her white coworker was there. And I got up, walked, went up one more block, and went to see my mom. And I was just kind of rattled. She said, "What happened?" And I told her, and she said, "Well, you just have a lot of narrow-minded people, son. Don't let it get to you. You'll be fine." If you look at that day in New York, you could be by yourself as a kid to go everywhere. But my parents weren't like that. They were like, "Oh, just run around, go here." I was always with a parent. So you really didn't experience racism too much. Everywhere I went, I was with my mom and dad, or I was with my grandmother, or I was with my aunt. And I functioned in Harlem. I played in the park on the weekend. I went and got my hair cut. Harlem was a lively place. You didn't have to go every other where. We had 2 or 3 movie theaters on 125th Street you go to, or you go to the popular movie theater on 86th Street. And there were movie theaters in Times Square, but they were awful. And at that time, Times Square is just crime river. You didn't want to go there. What you see, like on those shows, The Deuce, that's how bad Times Square was. It was very bad. If you went to Times Square later in my teenagers, you had to go with 5 or 6, 7 people because it was just that bad. If we had ever do a show in Times Square, I can tell you all the robberies and stuff I've seen. You wouldn't believe it.
That sounds like a lot.
It was a great experience for me. And being able to go to school downtown and come back and see how other people live, it was just great to see how other people live. You didn't just hang around your neighborhood where people only hang around a neighborhood. That's all they knew. My mom always wanted to be well cultured. She always wanted me to go to plays and stuff like that. And I enjoyed it. There's things I paid to see, people would pay $1,000 to see. I've seen the original Evita. I've seen James Earl Jones and Master Harold and the Boys when he just did the voice of Star Wars. I seen the Tap Dance Kid with Alfonso Ribeiro before he did the Pepsi commercial with Michael Jackson. My first play ever, I still have the, what do you call it? Yes, the ticket, but at the book where it shows the day and the time you went. The first play I ever saw was Mama I Want to, the playbill, thank you, was Mama I Want to Sing on 5th Avenue. And the lead singer there was gorgeous. Her name was Desiree Washington. She ended up marrying Mark Jackson, the basketball player. I believe they're still married, but it was just great to do. And my mom said, "We're always going to strive to be better. I want you to be well-rounded, and I always want you to be comfortable in your own skin." And I think that was something that kind of helped me out along my journey as far as racism goes, where I was like, well, you know what? If that's what they think about me, I'm going to prove them wrong.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How has your experiences growing up in Harlem with all the things that you were taught by your mom, your dad, your grandfather, your grandmother, professors, all of these different things, how have they maybe not so much shaped your worldview, but how have they impacted the way that you function and operate as an adult?
It taught me to be prideful in yourself. Where I can honestly say how my dad acted is how I model myself. I mean, everybody's journey is different. Your journey is different from mine. But imagine your dad say, "Guys, we're going out to dinner." He put his khaki pants on. You put your khaki pants on. There was none of this put a dress shirt on and your jeans and your shoes. If your dad dressed a certain way, you did it. When I was younger, I had blazers. I went to Catholic school. I had blazers. You know, like certain people you would see go on interviews and you can tell them that's their church outfit where it's kind of big, a little wrinkled, but that's what they wore in interviews. I always had dress clothes because I didn't go to public school. So I didn't have a lot of flashy clothes. I always just had regular clothes. And when it was time to go out, how my parents dressed, I dressed. At that time in the 70s, 80s, people had pride how they dress. You would never see someone go to the store in pajamas and slippers. You'd be ridiculed. You would be picked on. Never mind all that stuff. It's just something you just didn't do. As a black people, we were prideful in ourselves. When the women went to churches, they wore beautiful sunbonnets. They were dressed immaculately. There was none of this going to church in jeans. Just come as is. We just need a body here. That was unacceptable. So my dad always made sure I was groomed, make sure I always had my hair cut, make sure I carried myself well. It was never none of this getting parts on your head. And I probably had one half moon part because Mike Tyson had it. And then 2 weeks later, my mom made sure I cut it off. It's just how it was. Somebody's house, you got to abide by their rules. And that doesn't mean anything whether you have your hair dreads, however you choose your hair is just how you feel, but it's perception is everything. And I think once my parents kind of cut the handcuffs off to let me be in the world and develop on my own, that's when I got a reality check. I can remember being probably about 15 in Harlem, and they had the stop and frisk program. And this is when Koch is there, Dinkin is there, and they're like, cops can stop you for any reason, put you up against the wall to make sure. At that time, drugs is real bad with sharp needles and everything. So cops didn't walk around with gloves on their hands. So when they stop you and put you up against the wall, they say, "Do you have any sharp objects on you?" And you're like, "What are you talking?" But they're thinking about needles wise. So then they'll take the flashlight, start at your ankle, run it through your crotch and your anus, hit you, make sure you ain't got no guns, then come down the other side, they put their hands, ruffle your shirt up a little bit, make sure you got no weapons. If you ain't got no guns and they don't have no reason to stop you, they'll just let you go. They didn't care. They just let you go.
So with the
And
stop
after that,
and frisk, go ahead.
no, go on.
Okay, so I was going to ask with the stop and frisk. Um, one of the things that is really popular today is talking about um, police brutality. I mean,
Yes.
and it's unfortunate in some ways that it's popular because it makes it seem like it's just this trend. But the
Yeah.
reality is like police brutality is a thing that exists, right? And it's
Yeah.
real. Some of us have experienced it, some of us haven't, but it is real. It exists. And one of the things that I've encountered in a lot of conversations that I have with not just white people, but mostly white people, is this kind of thought that the only reason that I feel the way that I feel about police or encounters with police is because that's what the media and culture tells me to feel. And it's like, I feel that, but that's not the case for me. That might be the case for some people, but for
Right.
me, my feelings are derived from my experiences, right? And so that's my question to you. Do you have like, and I don't know if you even have a fear, but is there like this genuine unsettling in your
When I
bones, in
was
your
younger,
spirit?
I definitely didn't have a fear for cops because cops were in our neighborhood. They were the police officers, they were the sergeants, they were lieutenants, and it wasn't a big deal. I mean, I've had people live in my building who were court officers who went in uniform. You don't realize that until you get older what their position was, but you saw law enforcement and it was never a big deal. I was never involved with any type of illegal activity. None of my childhood friends growing up, so it was never a big deal for me. There were never raids going on in my building, cops coming in, kicking in doors. Where I lived on Fifth Avenue, it was rather quiet. If you wanted to go where all the action was, you went over to Lenox Avenue, and then you could see all the foolishness going on over there. But for the most part, didn't have a real bad perception of police until I got older. Growing up, getting clothes, I fell into what you call a percentage of you look like him. And when I say that, where um, I'm a Duke Blue Devil fan, I'm going to wear my Duke hat. I'm a Giant fan, I'm going to wear a Giant hat. Everybody in the month of October in New York is a Yankee fan. We all got Yankee hats. So you kind of look like the next kid walking. You haven't developed your own independent style because you look like everyone else in your community. Facts. So when they say, oh, you fit the description of, you're like, really, buddy? We all look alike now. And that's what you would hear us say. But I think once I got a little older, I started having different opinions of police and the way they treat us. Once I left elementary school, which is downtown, I went to school, Mount St. Michael in the Bronx. Mount St. Michael, I would say at the time I went, it was probably maybe 40% African American at that time. So I'm there from like 89 to 93. Had a great experience there. It was an all boys school. I didn't really experience any hard racism. There were things where people would say to each other, but it was just a mix of race of everybody. You had people who were Dominican from the Washington Heights. You had Puerto Ricans there. You had Albanians. You had Italians, Greeks, everybody. For the most part, we all got along. I can honestly say that when we had International Day, it just taught me so much about all the different races and cultures, calzones, things I never had before. I never heard of Arthur Avenue until I went to high school in the Bronx. And on every first Friday of the month, you would have half a day where you can go hang out with these guys. You can hang out with these guys. And I think by my junior year, once we had a retreat that junior year, we got cool with a lot of people in school. You go away for your junior retreat like that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you come back Friday, and you all get to put your feelings out on the table, and you realize we all got problems. I remember talking about, they said, have you had any traumatic experiences? And I just remember being a kid and my aunt passing on Christmas Eve. And actually Christmas, she died Christmas Eve, but we found out Christmas morning, and my dad getting up and leaving. I felt real bad. A good friend of mine who was on the retreat, he was telling me about what was going on with one of his family members. And then you get to see we all the same. We all related. At high school, there was some interesting that was just kind of from the early 60s. All the black kids sat on one side with the minorities, all the whites sat on the other. And when we came back from the retreat, you said, yo, I'm going to sit over here. Or no, I'm going to sit over here. And we kind of squashed that away. And it's just so how your mindset is. Why do you have to hang out with this one? Because by that time, okay, those are the guys that's in the chess club. These are the guys you run track with, and you learn to get along with everybody. And one thing I definitely enjoyed was intramurals in college where you got everybody from your home. Well, my last name is Gordon. I met people last name Giordano, people named Dippolito, just a variety of people. I think the only interesting thing that happened like my freshman year at Mount, one of the brothers there asked me where my family was from or as far as my background or origins. And I probably didn't pick up on it till maybe like a year later. He said, where's your family from? So I'm like, my mother's from Virginia, my dad's family from DC, but my dad's from Harlem, whatever. And what he was asking was, because he see Keenan is an Irish name. It could be a first name or a last name. Gordon is a popular Jewish name. It's a big group of Jews everywhere with the last name Gordon, but he just wanted to know where I was from. And I had no answer for him. But then later realizing, okay, well, that's interesting. And we'll talk about how that plays out on a factor where I end up going on an interview and they see Keenan Gordon not knowing. So when I show up and I come there, they're like, oh, okay. And you get in the interview and they say, well, I just graduated school, ask a couple of questions, and then they're hinting about where you're from or your background. But I pick up on it because I've experienced this before. And you're like, yeah, so-and-so, family's right. Then you get through it, and then you keep going.
It's so funny.
They'll do it like this. Now, is it Gordon, Keenan, or Keenan? They're trying to figure out which one is the first name. They can see clearly which is the first name, which is the last name, but they just want to make it easier for them to get into it.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've noticed. It's like when people have this idea about you without even knowing you, it's like they do their best to fit you into that idea rather than just accepting and understanding you as you are. It's one of the more interesting things that I've seen in life in general.
Right.
So my next question for you, sir, skin color. So we've been talking about being black and blackness and experiences as black people. How has your blackness impacted you as far as situations at work or relationships? Like, I don't know if you've ever been involved in any interracial relationships. I know that majority of my relationships have been interracial. In fact, somebody was telling the story the other day and it made me think of mine, but I didn't want to cut him off. I remember I was 17 and I was dating this girl from my church, and I remember one day, like, her mom called to talk to my mom to tell her, like, yo, I want them to break up because my daughter's heading places, and if she stays with your son, she's not going anywhere. And I'm like, what? Like, and this is all predicated on the fact that I'm black, and I don't know if she was saying it in the aspect of he's black, so he's lazy, this, that, and the third, or he's black, so he's going to be perceived as this, that, and the third, and just by her
Wow.
hitching her wagon to him, it's going to be harder. But either way, I mean, you know my mom, she kind of spazzed, and just like, yo,
Right.
you need to let a little white girl alone. Like,
Okay.
copy.
For the most part, growing up, I would say skin color definitely does play effect. I'm brown skin doesn't make me better than anybody else, but I've had the fair shake of where you see your dark counterparts get treated differently, whether their hair has dreads or whether they're treated this way or if they have their mustache a certain way. I definitely think skin color does play a role. Most perfect example. Everybody's seen that picture of OJ. OJ's not that dark. They even admitted to it how they made two textures darker when he's arrested and put it out there on the magazine. And I'm like, really, people? It is what it is. If someone charged with murder, it's not just because of their skin color or the way you view them. As far as dating outside the race, I'm married 10 years. My wife is black, love her to death. I've dated outside my race. And when I got to Iona College up in New Rochelle, at that time, Iona's probably maybe 29% black. So it's not really a culture shock being in New York, but now you're around all these different ethnicities. I remember being behind one girl in the class, and she was like, her name was Palabi. Girl was gorgeous. She would take her hair out, and her hair would come down her back. And I'd be like, "Man, where are you from?" She's like, "Oh, I'm Guyanese." I said, "I need you to get a map and show me where you're from because I've never heard of this place before in my life." And as you start to interact with people of different races, you see different cultures, and you get an idea. It's all about experiences that you have. And when people get to know you for who you are without looking at you as racism, I think that's great. Um, the first time I was actually detained by police was my junior year in college. I was with a friend outside a bar in New Rochelle. I was maybe about a block away, and we was just there talking. And I put a bottle of water by my foot, and the police car came up, and the guy said, "Oh, you were littering for whatever reason." I said, "Littering? I didn't do anything. Not knowing my rights." Being cocky, he was probably maybe 20 years old. He said, "Well, I need you to come with me. You got to get in the car." I said, "For what? I didn't do anything." So I know I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. I should have just handled it differently, but I get in the car. I wasn't cuffed or anything. I get there to the precinct, and I'm sitting on the bench, and I would say he's probably like a captain or whatever looking. And he says, "That's not him." I got contacts on, so I 20/20 vision. I could see him about 18 feet away, but they wanted to make sure. They said, "Well, we just need to fingerprint you and take your picture." I said, "I'm not fingerprinting anything. 5 cops around me. It's not going to go well for me." I do as they ask. They fingerprint me. They only take my picture. But they said, "You can call for help." Well, in other words, they wanted me to have someone come to claim me to say I wasn't who I was. I get put in a cell for no reason. I'm detained. Never had my rights read to me, anything. I end up calling my friend's father, who's a pastor who lived in New Rochelle. My friend who I was with, they didn't bring him in. He ends up coming to the precinct when his dad's there. They ended up asking for me. And I saw the guy say, "I don't think that's him." What the background story was, they were looking for someone who was from New York because they saw I had a New York ID, and they assumed I was one of his friends or associates I fit the description of. And after that, they just let me go. They gave me a desk ticket, and they wrote out everything they took out of my wallet possession. And on my ticket, it says I was stopped for littering. I was highly upset. I ended up going to school Monday. I told the dean of students what happened. And when I put the paper down, he said, "So for your ticket of littering, you was put in a cell." He called the police commissioner of New Rochelle because they have their number just in case anything happens, or like they're having a sporting event and they need police to be there. He ended up calling them, and they ended up having a long conversation right there in front of me. And he said, "I'm sorry you had to experience this." And at that time, I was just like, I can't believe I was just stopped just for no reason, just for the color of my sister want to stop me for no reason, put me in a police car. Then you start to realize all the things people go through. I ended up having to go to court, and I hope I'm saying this right. I believe my court date was Monday it's Monday or Tuesday, October 16th to 18th. I forget what year, but that was the day of the Million Man March in Washington, D.C. So I was in court that day. I showed up and the judge said, how do you plead? Not meaning to say it. I said, not guilty. He looked at me, looked at the charges. He looked, so you were detained for littering. What did they say you littered? It doesn't say what you did. They said I put a bottle beside my foot without throwing it out. Judge looked at it, dismissed the case, got out, and I hadn't had any problems with the law ever since. Never been arrested, detained, none of that foolishness. Nothing.
What about work?
As far as work goes, I may have experienced racism at work maybe once, but the difference with my job is I work for a tobacco company for 15 years. So as a sales rep, your main job is in the field. You come home, you get ready for the next day, you get in your car, which is your office, and you visit your 8 to 9 accounts a day. So you don't really see your coworkers. Y'all may have a meeting once every 5 weeks, do a lot of voicemail calls, because at that time, there's not even company phones at 98 when I'm hired. So with work, it was just really probably just about blending to get it together, because this is the interesting part. At that time, they had a rep who was up there and something happened where he was robbed or something like that. They wanted to find someone who they could have work Harlem. For those who don't know New York City runs all the way down from Battery Street all the way up to 207th. My territory, when it first started, I had all the low volume stores in Harlem, but the initial plan after I was trained was to get me to work Harlem. I ended up going for an interview, gentleman's name, Jim Guarneri. Really good guy. He gave me a chance, and I've been here talking to you so long, Keenan. I'm going to give you a shot. And I appreciate it. Once I got there, I was rough around the edges, but I learned how to conform. A gentleman named Juan Dominguez trained me, taught me a lot about being a professional. And by his calm demeanor, the way he led, I followed. I fit right in. My dad said, son, you put on your pants leg one leg at a time as they do, you learn as they do, and you get a check just like them. You'll be fine. And he gave me the confidence I needed. As far as the racism goes, I think it was just one of the things where we were at a Christmas party and somebody said something real inappropriate. And I said, look, that's really not cool. Even at 24, I knew that was wrong. Address it with that individual. This person was like maybe 10 years my senior, and I guess he thought making a joke was funny. And all the people they corrected him on it, and that was it. I never had any racism issues at Reynolds. But the key point, the reason why I said about my hiring, our rival company, Lori Lard, which is Newport, they hired a slew of intelligent Dominican reps because they wanted people who spoke Spanish, could penetrate the stores that they could never get in. You had Caucasians up there trying to work, and it just wasn't working out. Never mind being scared of the area, but they couldn't relate to the people. And they're like, well, why are you here? So when they saw opportunity and they hired me, I was at the right place at the right time. And I was there for 15 years and made a career out of it. Had no problem. One thing I did learn was if you're going to be in Harlem, you have to defend it. When I went to apply for a loan, I had an account with a company where I saved up a real good amount of money. And I went for a loan and they denied me. They said, oh, you don't have enough credit. So I'm like, I don't have enough credit. I got thousands of dollars. I'm not talking like 10, 15,000. I'm not talking over 50. I got over 50,000 in the account with them, and they wouldn't give me a loan. They denied me. So what ended up happening was on my credit report, I only had one credit card. It was Marine Midland that I used twice a year in college. And I had like a Today's Man card I would just use to get dressed card. They said, oh, you don't show up enough on credit reports. With me having a company car, I never went to make any purchases. I just saved my money. I ended up going back to get a loan. My mom had to co-sign for me just so I could get the loan. And I'm like, this don't make no sense. I mean, you can see I'm at a job at that time for 7 or 8 years, and I still get credit loans. And that's when you look at how the way they do practices on about being able to buy property and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I remember my grandfather told me a story. My dad's a junior, my grandfather's senior, Isaiah Benson Gordon Sr. He was telling me how he went to get a loan for his house in Washington, D.C. in the Rock Creek Churchill area. He was denied twice. Someone told him, go in there a third time, but this time go in your service uniform. Just do it. He went in his service uniform and they gave him the loan because he served his country. And that's wrong. That's wrong. And these are things my grandfather bestowed upon me. He didn't get to see me graduate college, but he was active in my life at that time. He always wrote me. He always called and checked on me. And these are the things my forefathers experienced that they explained to me. I remember, and I'm sure a lot of Black people have had this experience where they go, okay, are you the only Black person at your job? At that time, I'm the only Black person in my division. So it's about 9 of us, and my boss was white, and that was fine. I was always treated fairly. We had one Puerto Rican guy, one Dominican guy, and it was me. It was 2 women, and I was the only Black person, and I was never made to feel uncomfortable. They knew I worked uptown. They knew I worked hard. You can't be somewhere 15 years and fake it. You really got to be able to put
That's
forth
facts.
this effort. You can't fake it. You can maybe get away 2 or 3, but if you're trash or you're a bad person in the sales industry, they will get you out of Dodge. And my mom taught me something, son, you can't tell everybody everything you know or you'll become obsolete. And one thing I was really happy, my last 3 years there, I was a #1 rep and they couldn't take it from me. It was certain dynamics that fell part of that. And that's when it wasn't even about just racing. They just didn't like me as a person. Where uptown in Harlem, it wasn't a lot of investment into the culture. At that time, from the late 80s, probably 80, 89, 90s, Harlem just became a hellhole, a real cesspool. You'd have abandoned buildings, not as bad as the Bronx was. Not I'm shooting shots at them. I'm just giving my example where you would see now gas station wanted to open up. It wouldn't just be a regular gas, it'd be BP plus, it'll be mobile. You now had other places, not like Wawa, but we gotta realize you didn't get your first 7-Eleven in the city of New York until 2002. Think about that. There were no real chain accounts. You had CVS, Rite Aid. Once, oh, well, here's what your mama say. Before I come uptown, do you want anything from Dwayne Reed before I come uptown? There were no Dwayne Reeds in Harlem. None. Now you may have realistically about 25 or 30 of them there because all these accounts I called on. So once these accounts came uptown, you started having the 7-Elevens go up, it was what I needed to grow share in Harlem, where having Columbia University over there, having people who smoked our Camel brand, which was our popular brand, it allowed my numbers to thrive. And I figured out look, it's these pre-book numbers and these tells on gun orders you got to get. Being there 15 years, I befriended managers where, say, if I wanted to do an inventory count, he would give me the passcode. I'd log it in my notes. You got to have the code to open a tells on gun. Once you place the scanning order, I would tell him what he was missing right on the sheet. He said, well, just place the order. You need the order number. And then the third code I would have in my notes would be the code to the bathroom, which I got tired of asking. So my notes are probably still there. It's 3 codes in the corner. And if I didn't tell you what they were, you would never know. And I thrived. I did very well. I would have my boss, other people work with me to see what I was doing. And say, you're doing a pretty good job. But they want to know, well, what are you doing to affect change? I said, well, look, I'm growing share. I'm helping things out. And their attitude was, well, all these new stores are opening. Maybe that's helping his share brand. And it was, but I had a different approach to the way everyone else had. Because compared to downtown, if you have like 42nd Street, you could have 8 different chains all on the block. You have your Rite Aid, your CVS, everything, where I just have a CVS here, 2 blocks over is a Rite Aid. So I was able to concentrate on certain pockets to help grow share. And, I ended up getting written up for something very very small, nothing big deal, but that ends up your bonus. And you start to see the rebuttals behind it. And you're like, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I'm doing well and I'm performing, how can I be #1 and you saying I'm not affecting change? But since I left, that territory has not been the same. And you move on. So as far as the work culture at the company I was at, I didn't experience a lot of racism until I left to go to other companies.
Okay, yeah. And I have similar experiences at a lot of places that I work. Like, it wasn't just like outright I'm racist, calling you the N-word and stuff like that. There was a lot of but I worked more directly with people too, so there was like a lot of subtle undertones and things like that. It's always interesting to hear the different experiences of people in their work environments based off of being a Black person or minority of any sort, a woman, whatever the case is. Like, I've seen where because this person is a woman, she's talked to in any kind of way, and it's like, whoa. And so, like, being able to connect and identify with people who were white, where it's like, like, you feel it because it's not the same because I'm Black and you're white, but it's similar because you're a woman and I'm Black, and we're both viewed as less than this person. And so it's really interesting to hear the different experiences there.
Right. But once I left there, I started working at a Time Warner Cable for 2 years and 1 day exactly. Now, here's the funny part. You're in a room It's different people, different pay grades, different levels, and you're hired as a sales rep. Not a problem. So you come into the office and you're starting to figure out. You're trying to get. You got like a maybe a 10 contact list, but you probably got about 60 buildings. When that area was empty, people probably tried to meet the property manager, steal your territory, whatever, and a relationship's already built. So after being there for 2 weeks, not getting any sales or anything, they're like, "Well, you should go out door knocking." I'm like, "What do you mean by door knocking?" Oh, just go out to some of these buildings and door knock. So I'm thinking they're talking about in my area because I go out to the campus. They know they want me to take my black behind, go up in their projects and start door knocking. I'm like, I'm 40 years old. I'm a door knocker now. So this is what you want from me. So I would see some of my other white counterparts on what they were able to do. And they would go into property managers and stuff. And I said, I got to figure this out. One day, I put a suit on, put a white shirt on, no tie or anything. I went to Dunkin' Donuts, got about 4 different boxes of donuts and orange juice, whatever. I went into Douglas Edelman on 86 and what was it? Madison Avenue. They walked right in early, about 9 o'clock. Often just come to life. And this lady was there. She was white. She's like, "Sir, can I help you?" I said, "Well, actually, ma'am, I'm here to help you. Everybody comes and asks for something. I'm actually here to give you something." "What are you here to give me?" These are our donuts for our meeting." She said, "Okay." So she sees I'm dressed, so she's not taken back or wanting to throw me out. She wants to know, "Well, I didn't hear anything about a meeting." "Oh, I work for Time Warner Cable. I'm the concierge rep, and I work for this area." Instead of just saying I'm a sales rep, I built myself up to something I wasn't. I told them how we give VIP services to clients like yours. You have people who want to move in. They don't want to have to call the hotline, and they can just call us directly, and we can do that. So by coming in, I built value. Where I've known people who went to these offices, they threw them out. They threw them out. So I took a different approach. So I was comfortable in my skin, but I knew how to address them where they would take the time to talk to me. Lady was like, "Okay." So she opens up, eat the donut. I give one to the secretary. I said, "I'm going to look the other way. If you want to take it, one another one, it's not a problem." She ends up bringing me in. I end up dealing with her. She ended up sending my information to her boss, and I ended up working things out. Started doing business. Went to Century 21. I never got anything out of it. I ended up going to another company, and it was just all on your approach. People treat you the way they view you. So I could be sitting here in a suit working, and from the way they told this other African American person, "Oh, you got to get outdoor and not beat the streets." He's in a regular blue Time Warner shirt because after 3 o'clock, he's going to start to go door knocking when people are home. And it's just the way they treat you at corporate work. We had one lady there. She was Jewish, and she worked with all the top major property owners. I think being Jewish had a lot to do with it because when she would go to certain meetings, I forget the two big Jewish real estate. It's one of the Stein companies, and I forget the other name. She would go with another man from our company because they didn't want to talk to her, but because she was a woman and they were men. But because she was Jewish, they would entertain taking the meeting, and then he would explain what we could do, and they would do it. And I just thought that that was very interesting because these were meetings I could never get under no circumstances. By the time you even get there, it's a wall you can jump on, a hurdle, and then they're like, "No, you stop here, leave the information, and just leave. We'll get back to you." But she would get the same meeting, and I saw once she sent out a proposal that she did. Her said concierge manager supervisor, and we all me like, how's she able to put that on her title? So she made it seem like she was our boss. So on sales, as to put it in perspective, Time Warner could care less about your feelings. They will put your sales up on the top. This lady was doing $18,000 to $16,000 a month selling cable. I want you to put that in perspective. She's doing 4 to 5 sales a day. All the proper managing companies. She doesn't deal with the buildings per se. She deal with the leasing offices. She was paying them like $25 per lease. So if you have to get, let's just say hypothetically, you're giving 25. You have to give out $100 for each of the sales you did that month. So you got to give out 2,500. She made 17,000. You think she's really missing it? And she had no problems with. She says, "I pay what I weigh," and she's so far ahead of everybody else. You couldn't get close to her to see her. All the Yankees, all the Mets, all those players, she did their cable service. She knew their agencies. She circumvented everything and she cornered the market. And if you was of color, there was nothing you could do about it. The way she addressed her email, it was no problem. We even confronted the supervisor, and he was Jewish, and he said, "Hey, look, it's just the way things are going. She brings a certain amount of volume." So now I'm like, okay, so it's all about presentation. There was an area up in Westchester that had Time Warner Cable up there. So the rep up there, he didn't work as hard. because he just didn't see the numbers. Like, I guess what their numbers were skewed up in Westchester compared to ours down in the city. So I went up in this area and I started building relationships and I started getting sales. What I didn't realize is they keep track of what your sales were. So in Manhattan, you may see like 8 or 9 sales, but the other 15 were for up in Westchester. And that kind of sent out an alarm to, well, how could this guy come down there and actually build sales? I ended up talking to a agent that I was dealing with who had a friend who worked out the other office up there. So when I met them, I built the relationship. They said, Keenan, you can't do that. You got to shut it down. But she was allowed to book sales in everybody's territory, all throughout Staten Island, throughout Manhattan, throughout Queens, because Brooklyn didn't have Time Warner at the time. But she was allowed to do it. And me being black, they're like, you're too smart for this. We can't allow this. They ended up writing me up, and I just couldn't believe it. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever. About 3 months later, something else happened. They wrote me up for it, and they ended up terminating me. And I told them, okay, if you're going to terminate me, that's fine, but I'm not signing this sheet. I'll give you everything back to you own, but you don't own my signature. And I definitely feel it was definitely racially motivated, because in their mind, they're like, look, you're a good person. You should go out door knocking, build your sales from the ground up. And I'm like, no, I want to do what you do, because that's the way I've lived my life. I conform to what I see the successful people do. If you see everybody at the bottom here and they're all doing the same thing, door knocking, how can they all be successful? But if you can build relationships with the leasing managers, because what happens is if in New York, once you're shown a place, you don't go into the property manager, get the keys, you go through the leasing agent. He signs your contract. So they're already getting the referral, and they're sending an email to them, oh, go through with them, because like I said, they're giving them back $25 a month. So if you got a building with 32 floors, just apartments, people are always moving out. You got people who own 18 different buildings. They're always moving out, all the referrals coming in. So you're dealing with your one building. That person has your leasing agent. By the time you call them, oh, I dealt with this person, Jay, or whatever. Let's just say her name is Jackie. Oh, we gave her a cable service. You're like, how can she be in every building? And then you realize it's something else going on. But once you become smart enough to figure it out, that's when they have a problem.
I dig. Yeah, that's and that's what I'm talking about. What you were just saying. It's like they might not say, "Oh, Keenan, you're a nigger," but what they'll do is stop you from doing what's going to cause you to advance and rise the ranks in their company. And it's and again, for anybody watching this, like my experiences, his experiences, it's not the experiences of all black people, all the time. So we all have our different experiences, but it's just understanding that the experiences that you're familiar with or heard of aren't the only experiences out there. And so that's, why we're here, to help provide perspective and understanding for people who want to ultimately, because in order to get that perspective, you got to want to ultimately. Yeah. And then also, for people who need it, I understand that there are a lot of people who need understanding who don't want it. And those are really the harder people to deal with. But getting back on topic, and I'm going to close this out. Well, heading towards closing out, winding down, I should say. I'm going to maybe ask 2 more questions, but definitely at least this one, and we'll see how much time is left afterwards. And this was actually one of my favorite ones to come up with. The traumas or some of the generational things that have passed down from, generation to generation as black people. One of the things that we touched on earlier is the strength, the perseverance, the resilience that's in our DNA. What are some of the things that, as maybe not all black people do this, but as a collective, black people do this, or maybe something that's in your family of black people? It's like, okay, this is something that I want us to move away from. What are some of those things?
I would definitely say, like I said, my impression from a young age, tell me about who I was, learn about my people. My middle name is Langston. I had to do a report on Langston Hughes, and that got me looking into the Roaring '20s, even though he wasn't part of that era, but I'm just talking about that genre came along and learning about different writers, people who all would move to Harlem and write these great novels, and I wanted to learn about it. And that was something that was real impactful in my life, to know that we could be writers, we could be editors. In Harlem, they had the Amsterdam News that was very popular. I can't remember what is the equivalent of that one in Chicago. I believe it was called a Defender, that was around a very long time. But these were people who lived in my neighborhood who were writers. At that time, if the news media wanted to talk to someone, they would either talk to David Dinkins, they would talk to Al Sharpton, and they would talk to a lot of the writers or people who had a lot to say who was going on in Amsterdam, who were writing about social injustice, about things that were going on, where you had marches, protests, and these are things I saw growing up. And it's very impactful to see people come together to do things, and then to see how we've all just become a part where, oh, we don't like this one, or this one think they're better than us, or this one think it's cute, and got to do better than that. But as far as experiences, I mean, other thing I've experienced racism is vacation racism. Oh, that's big. I've had it where I was in Jamaica, maybe I had like just a regular polo shirt on, and one of the workers, he would just come and hang out with us on the beach or whatever. And 3 days later, it was my birthday, whatever, and it was one of the white ladies who was there visiting as a customer, same as I was. I was like, yeah, well, today's my birthday. And the guy's like, what are you going to do? I said, I guess we'll meet here, whatever. She was like, oh, that sucks. They're making you work on your birthday? I'm like, why would you say I'm working on my birthday? And you can see all of the white people by the pool started like, she's like, it's your birthday. You should have off. And her boyfriend is putting his head down, and he's probably made like 28 at the time. I'm probably like 25. He's like, it's not his birthday. But I mean, is he working here? They said, do you hear him have a Jamaican accent? Does he sound like he's from here? And she's like, so you don't work here. I just assumed you did. Now, my polo shirt, no one had that on. It wasn't like I had a standard uniform like I worked there, but she couldn't get past that the color of my skin, I had paid to come here for vacation like everybody else. And you're like, lady, really? And then you could see her guilt because later that night, she comes to me, look, I'm so sorry. I said, you don't have to be sorry. You're just comfortable in your racism because you said it out loud. And that took her a breast. And it wasn't that I was unforgiving, but I didn't get mad. It's like, it's the night of your birthday. You're really having a good time. But I want to let her know, look, I know what you did and you want to apologize. It's okay. Run along. It's okay. I've been in the Dominican Republic. I've been there 5 times. A good friend of mine, Omar, he had the pleasure of taking me to his country. And we're in Santiago. Now, Santiago is pretty much where all the light-skinned Dominicans live. It's just the truth. I'm just telling the truth. So while I'm there, we're going into a party. It's raining. I take my umbrellas back to the car. I'm nicely dressed, brown shoes, dress pants, brown shirt on, dressed to a T. I go up to the front to get in. I have a bald head or whatever. I don't have a beard, just a regular thin mustache, nicely dressed. They're like, can't get in, not tonight. I said, what's the matter? Telling the story out of chronological order, they think I'm Haitian and I want to get into their party and they don't want to let me in. So my friend Omar comes out like, hey, why can't he get in? And the guy talks to my friend Omar in Spanish. This ain't the guy. What is this, like your security or something, your bodyguard? You can't come in here. So the girl whose birthday it was had to come out, explain to them. And once I spoke English, I'm like, what's the problem? They looked at me dumbfounded like, how can you speak English? And then I was like, okay, whatever. So I get in the party. I don't spend not one dime. I sip 2 glasses of water. That's it. I wouldn't spend not $1 in a franchise. On that vacation, about 3 days later, we're in Boca Chica, and there's a hotel. So this is where you got to know how you play your race card. So I got sand all over me, but if you step up like 30 feet to the back of the entrance to the hotel, they got the showers there. So I go there and use the shower. I'm washing it off, and 2 of the military guys said, oh, you can't use this. I turn around like, dude, what the F is your problem? I'm an American. Yeah, me and you the same color, but I'm not you and you not this. You understand me? And the guy said, let him go, just let him leave. So I walked in their lobby, used the bathroom there, and came out and could care less. I think there's times when things have happened to us because of the trauma. You may see us overreact, like when the police ask us for ID. They're like, ask us ID for what? Like, for example, if you're stopped, Charlie, and they ask you for your ID and you're driving the car, why do they need my ID? And they always tell us to comply. Well, if you treat us the same way you treat all other counterparts, it'll be a white guy in his car. He's there. When y'all stop him, do you ask his wife for ID? Do you ask his 14-year-old son for ID? Charles, Charles, you brought me here to give great conversation and dialogue. So I've asked this to my counterpart, and they don't know how to explain it. I said, when you're stopped with your dad, do they ask your ID, your mom's, you and your sisters?
Yeah. One time, and well, it's not off topic because this is my Black experience. So never mind. I was going to say it's off topic.
Tell your story.
Like when I was first, earlier on, well, I was only in the military 4 years, but I say about my second, third year in, I was stationed out in Norfolk. And Norfolk is only about 2 hours away from Fredericksburg. And so a buddy of mine who's also from Fredericksburg, white dude, he was stationed in Norfolk too, and we would come up like every weekend. And in retrospect, I wish we didn't because we would have been able to experience more staying in our town. I mean, yeah, staying where we were, but this is what we knew, what we were familiar with. So we would come home regularly. And one of the weekends that we came home, I talked to mommy and Papa Joe. I was like, "Yo, can I throw a party like at the house?" And mommy and Carrie and whoever else was out of town, but Papa Joe was home. And Papa Joe was like, "Yo, it's cool. Just make sure that y'all aren't like stupid loud." So I have a party. We're in the basement, and I mean, it was stupid loud, but it wasn't really like disturbing him. It was more like if anybody would have been disturbed, it'd been like the neighbors or whatever. And I don't remember what exactly happened that got the police called, but the police were called, and they weren't called to this house to the party. They were called like to like a neighbor's house or something like that. But at the time that the police rolled by, I was outside smoking a cigarette, um, and the cop just saw me, and so he sits at that stoplight in front of the house for probably 2 minutes, and I see him, but
Yeah,
it was
they're
it was
they're trying to figure out how to engage you. That's what they do. They
right.
want to figure out how to engage you.
And I'm seeing him, and I'm just sitting there smoking. And at that time, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit feeling myself. I'm in the Navy, I'm in the military. You can't tell me nothing. So I'm sitting there and I'm smoking my cigarette, like, yeah, he about to try to mess with me, but ain't nothing he can do. I'm in the military. So he comes up and he's like, "Yo, like, what are you doing here?" Like, "Oh, this is my house. Like, you live here." I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And so he's asking for ID. He wants to see like all these different things. And I don't know. I think maybe the lights is what did it. But Papa Joe woke up, came downstairs, comes out the front door, and he's like, "What are you doing talking to my son?" The cop's like, "This is your son?" Papa Joe's like, "Yeah." So he's like, "My apologies, sir," and then walks away. And it's
Because
like,
he got the validation from another white man where, okay, this area is okay. Because I've been in 3 apartments that been, I could you say, raided by the police. And I don't mean it to that drastic where they're putting us on the floor, handcuffing us, but
mhm,
where we're having a party and one is in college. So the cops come to the door, they walk in. Well, we want to make sure everything is okay. Do you guys have any drugs or illicit things? Now, there were drugs there at the party, but people like, I'm not admitting to nothing. I'm not answering nothing.
right,
Officer, what's the problem? Well, we have an officer lives upstairs. We knew the officer lives there, but he wasn't in town. And they say he called the police. And they like to play these games where they like to ask things. And it's something you need to realize. When they stop one of us, they like to get all our IDs because they want to run them to see if any of us has any warrants. That's what they say. But if you're on probation, they want to bring you in so you can be charged and taken back to jail. That's why they do that. That's a fact. I don't care what any cop says. That's not always the case. We're trying to make sure there are no felonies. Well, when you do that to the other white counterparts, you don't do that. It can be 20 of them at the party, the guy yelling and screaming, "You can't touch me. You can't do F to me, nothing." They may arrest one person and they may let them yell and scream and just say, "Hey, tone it down," and let it go. Now, years later, when I'm in my condo in Harlem, a lady was having a party up on the roof. It was probably maybe about 60 people there. We was very loud, yelling and screaming. 2 cops came up. Now I lived on the next block was of the precinct. So they came upstairs and they're like, okay, they gotta tone this music down. We gotta see what's going on. Uh, Another Caribbean Indian gentleman came up, showed his badge, talked to the cops for about 40 seconds, and that was it. They nodded, shook hands, left, turned the music up. No harm, no foul. And it's just to show that that blue wall, that badge, they respect. The skin color, they respect. But if they feel threatened or something, they'll use keywords like this. Well, why are you acting so sporadically? Calm down. You're yelling and screaming. It's not that we're yelling and screaming. You're treating us different. Because if our white counterparts can yell and scream, "Don't you touch my effing son. You don't know this. He's a child, this. But for us, it's like, well, no, ma'am, you're going to have to tell it to the judge. We're going to bring your son in for questioning. If you're ever stopped by the police, you never answer any questions. You say, well, look, I don't have anything to say. If you want to bring me in, feel free to go get a warrant. If you don't have enough evidence to bring me in for questioning, I have nothing to say to you, officer. That's it. I'm so trained where, from just experiences, if I saw a cop and he said, "Good morning," nod, morning, that's it. I have nothing else to say. Because when you talk to law enforcement, they're trained to engage you, to talk
mhm,
about things. You can be coming home from the hospital. I have my daughter. This was here in Virginia. It's the only time I've ever been stopped in Virginia. And he goes, "Where are you coming from?" From the hospital. My daughter has strep throat. I had the light cut on. He could see it. He was like, "Oh, okay. Hold on for a second." He ended up wanting to take my license or whatever to look, see everything was okay. So I had a CDL license. He ended up coming back with a toy for my daughter, gave it to me, said, "Look, get home safely." And I was like, okay. So I actually had a good experience with the police here. Never been stopped outside of that here in Virginia, but it's just the things that they do, the things that they say to us. Where are you going? Where are you headed? What are you doing here? I went out to Long Island to go to a friend's house, and they stopped me going there for a fight party. So at the time, I got tinted windows on my commercial vehicle, and they said, "Well, where are you headed to?" "I'm going to a friend's house." Friend's house to watch the fight. So they're engaging me. So what I do is I end up cutting the lights on in my car. I lower all four windows, and I said, "You see those four pizzas in the back? I'm not going to eat them myself, officer." To a friend's house. "Well, where exactly is this house?" "I don't know, officer. I got a garment right here. It's the navigation. It's taking me." This is before cell phones were big and everything. You go, "Okay, all right. You can head on. No problem. Let me go." They want to do these engaging questions to see if you'll slip up, or "I thought you just
Give
said
them
this."
enough to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And Charlie don't play that.
But it's you got to realize the anxiety of it is when you're in your skin and you're stopped, and then you see they call for the second officer. That means they either plan on arresting you or they got plans for you. You don't call for a second officer just to give you a ticket. So we've all been there. We've all had that form of PSTD, and it's a lot. But I'm learning to be comfortable in my skin. I see a lot of racial injustices, and whether some experience I haven't had as some of my other counterparts, some of my friends who are dark skinned, everybody's story is real, and everybody has a right to their feelings.
Yeah. And I think that that's a wonderful note to end on. I mean, I know it, and you probably know it, but everybody else wouldn't know it. That we could probably sit here and have this conversation for hours, if not days. You know,
Yeah.
I love to talk. You love to talk, and then just I've lived almost almost 31 years. My birthday is in like 8 days. I'm excited. I'm one of those. First of all, I'm one of those people who celebrates his birthday all month. Like all
So
month
do
is
I. My
my
birthday
birthday.
is 12 days after yours, if I'm correct.
The 18th.
No, I am the 22nd.
Okay, so you 16 after me.
Yes.
16. So I celebrate all month, and I love my birthday. I'm not one of those that's like it's just another year. Like if I
Yeah.
say it's just another year, that's me playing it off like, yo, I don't want to let you know how hype I am, but I'm hype. I need you to
Yeah.
come through properly. Right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
like you said, we all have different experiences, but then we all have some similar experiences. It's kind of like one of my favorite analogies to give is marriage, right? Like you take any two marriages you can think of, and there's going to be tons of similarities in them, but also tons of differences. And the reality is, we all have to figure out what works for us. As Black people, we have to figure out how we want to move and navigate this world, regardless and in spite and despite how we're treated by anybody, whether that person's white, black, red, blue, or purple. In addition, we need this is a need. We need other people who aren't black.
Who
And
understand the
yeah,
plight
we
and what's
exactly we
going
need you
on.
to understand. I don't need you to feel guilty about
But just
anything
understand,
about
don't deny
history.
it or look the other way.
Exactly.
Because Chris Rock has one of my favorite jokes. He said they got this new app out there that tells all who your friends who are racist, and it's called Facebook. Yeah, and that just happened. And like I said, I do agree you need to have different friends of different ethnicities where they can relate. But I didn't term this phrase, but there's something called rally. Rally it's a rallying of a racial experience. Say you bring two men on here, Charlie, that I don't know and never met them before, and just out of nowhere, you put on a tape what happened to George Floyd. We all feel empowered. We should do something because we're all black. We've all experienced that experience. I've never been thrown on the floor, face down, handcuffed, never. I've never had someone put a knee in my back, never. But I could see that being me. And that's a rally experience where you're called to task like, oh my God, how could that happen? When you see that Sandra Bland video, understand this young lady was pulled over for a broken taillight. The officer told her to stop smoking in her vehicle. She didn't blow it in his face. She was smoking. He already had her ID. He could have came back to the car, gave her a ticket. He said, ma'am, I want you to get out the car. She said, I gave you my information. She walks around the car. She's talking to him. He flings her down to the ground, spraying her wrist. She's put in a police car. 2.5 days later, she's dead over a tail light. He had her information.
And that's one of the bigger things that I keep seeing coming up, and that really frustrates me. And I know I said we was finna end, and we're going to somehow. No,
Right,
it's okay. It's okay because we're here to talk about the Black experience, and
right.
today
Like
it's
the
not
Black
our last day
experience.
to do it, but it's our last day to do it.
I only imagine how you could say someone wearing a hoodie is threatening. No, wearing a white hoodie with the eyes cut out at midnight, that's very scary. But for Trayvon Martin walking from a store, and I can relate to that. To be 16 years old, I've never had this happen to me, to be walking and someone following you into your development, like say my dad's building, and I go around the corner and you're continuing to follow me. And when I turn around and confront you, why are you here? Why are you doing this? And I'm like, yo, leave me alone. I turn away, you follow me, and I swing on you. Now you're ready to fight, and now you want to claim self-defense or stand your ground. I don't understand it. As a Black male, I can't follow any woman, any race or creed, following her around and her tell her, stop following, leave me alone. Because they say, well, what would your intent of following her? Why were you following her? And I'm like, you're following, he's committed no crime. He picked up a Snapple and a bag of Skittles and was walking home while on the telephone talking to one of his female friends. He was, 30 feet away from his dad's house in the development, and he had a hoodie on, and he was scary. It was Florida, and it was raining. He committed no crime. But that's the way he painted the picture.
And that's the reality is that a lot of the videos that we've seen, and that's something that I want to put emphasis on. The ones that we've seen are just the ones that we've seen. And I don't know if anybody listening, maybe you never thought about this, but just imagine how many more instances there are that weren't caught on camera, because it's not required in every city and state for police officers to wear the body cam or even to have them on. How many instances have we heard about where
like the gentleman
the officer
upstate
didn't have his body camera on?
like the gentleman
Why
upstate just yesterday, and I don't want to say it was connected anywhere, but they say he had a learning disability function. The police stopped and said, well, you were acting sporadically. He was on his way home. He's like, officer, I don't want to be touched. I'm just on my way home. I'm not bothering anybody. I've done nothing wrong. Well, we got a call. Someone was acting suspicious. They handcuffed him, sit him on the curb. He didn't do anything, fight back. He didn't spit on anybody. They put the bag mask over his head. He dies. He tells them, I can't breathe. And just yesterday they ruled, oh, it was no fault of the police. But yet now they can move forward with the civil suit case to sue, because if you don't put him in handcuffs, you don't put that over your head, he would be alive today. So it's a blackmail. If 5 cops stop me, want to put handcuffs on my mask, I'm fighting for my life because the color of my skin.
One of the things that with Breonna Taylor's murder in that case, you saw like her family got they got paid. I forget how much it was, how much the settlement was, but it was like they won that. And I found it really interesting that her family is paid because of what happened to her, yet no
one can be
officers are
charged with a crime.
Be right, like it's like,
And the district attorney said, get the line right. The district attorney said, who was African American, but he's married to the white granddaughter of the governor there. He said she was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah,
because of the color of her skin.
Which is amazing that you could ever be at your home
Say that
at
out
the
loud.
wrong time. Right? It's like I'm at home at the wrong time. And so, okay, now we're actually going to close, and I'm going to leave you with this, right? As we're talking about all of these different cases, and a lot of them have settlements, right? Think about how much city money, your money, taxpayer money, is being spent because of racism. I don't even want to reduce it to police brutality, because I mean it is police brutality.
Classic negligence due to racism.
Yeah,
that's what you call it. Classic negligence due to racism, because you see that person as a person, the way you treated them was racially motivated.
So that pothole could have been fixed, but you're fine with racism, and that led to the cops in your town killing somebody, and now millions of dollars is being spent on their family to avoid whatever, you know. But yeah, I'm really gonna end there. God, thank you all for joining us so much. Thank you,
Yes,
thank
thank
you,
you.
thank you. Thank you, Keenan, for joining us. It's been really wonderful hearing your experiences growing up in New York, your experiences in Virginia, being from Harlem, and just navigating all of the different terrains that you had to navigate, right? Because that's one of the things about life. No matter what category you fall into, we all have our multiple categories and subcategories. You know, it's like you're black, but you're a black man. You're a black man from the north. All of these different things, and it's really cool to hear the different perspectives from people. I personally believe, Don believes, and that's why we have this page, that through these conversations, we can unlock and tap into deeper understanding and perspectives that will, in turn, affect and impact change. And so that's why we're here. We appreciate you sharing. Um, Really quickly before we go, just want to let everybody know tomorrow, Dom and I will be back recapping this entire week for you guys, giving you not a preview, but just a little snippet of I guess a snippet and a preview is the same thing, but just a little talking a little bit about what's coming up next week. I'm really excited. It's a polarizing issue, but we're not going to be addressing it from the polarizing standpoint. But it's still going to be fun. Um, and then, as always, share our conversations, so that these could reach as many people as possible. Go to our link tree and our profile. You can follow us on all of the platforms. Turn the notifications on so you never miss when we go live. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you for tuning in.
Perfect. It went through.